What's that one small business, local to you, that you believe to be a front for something illegal? There's a VCR repair shop near me. Just VCR repair. There are not enough VCR players in the city to keep that place open. Now that no one makes new VCRs, the demand for repairs has dramatically increased by a factor of 10. Unfortunately, 0 multiplied by 10 is still 0. I have a funny story about something like this. I'm a dentist, and I buy lunch for our staff quite frequently. One time, we bought food from a local Mexican joint. I got a burrito that ended up being mostly meat, and it was really good meat. I asked how much it was, and it was quite cheap. I immediately assumed it was a money laundering front. I don't think most of the country understands just how strong a foothold the Mexican drug cartel has in Wyoming. It is a perfect distribution hub. Central, but invisible. Low average incomes, and lots of anonymity and isolation. Vast underground networks that are up for sale to any corporation willing to pony up. Hell, there are whole towns up for sale that are basically empty, and local economies that regularly build and wall out entire communities when mine's close. Lots of opportunity for a savvy investor drug cartel. There's a used car lot across the street from my work that never sells any cars. I've been working at my job for 5.5 years, and 1, maybe 2, have left the lot in that entire time. My parents have a similar used car lot that is across a field and a street from their house. I haven't lived there for over 10 years now, but for the 10 years before that I can't honestly say I've ever seen a car driven off their lot. Buddy of mine from Alabama has a dealer's license. One of the requirements is to have a car lot. Most of his business is going to auctions, buying cars, and selling to individuals looking for specific cars. He almost never sells cars on his small lot. He sublets most of it out to other car dealers who also have dealer licenses. I used to always go to this little tire shop near my house. Across the parking lot, way in the back, was another building where they were always working on cars. I needed some brake pads changed, so I drove back there and asked if they would change them. 3 guys rushed out. They're all nervous and weird acting, and asked what I wanted. I told them, then they pulled my car in, changed the pads super quick, said, no charge, goodbye. And that was that. It was a really weird, eerie experience. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and I heard that place got raided by the cops, and turned out to be one of the biggest meth dealers in the county. Small town in mountains of North Carolina. Somehow, we had a deli that seemed to be right out of New York City. All the good brands from back home. Almost nobody ate there. I only saw another customer a couple of times. Great cold cuts, excellent subs. If you know anything about rural North Carolina, about the only DNA is from the British Isles here. The guys running the place were as Italian as you could get, and there were always at least 3 of them hanging around the deli. Not doing anything, just sitting in chairs back in the kitchen. One would reluctantly get up to fix a sandwich when I ordered one. They were there for years. I'd love to see what the P&L they showed to the IRS looked like, because I'm certain it showed a thriving business. I don't even have to think it, it's been proven. I live in Myrtle Beach, so we have had a ton of discount beachwear stores. You know, the ones where you buy 5 shirts for $10 and they give you a free hermit crab. The P&L models are absolutely mind-blowing, since rent is crazy expensive, and they obviously aren't turning a huge profit. Turned out that the store's main transactions were illegal wire transfers going overseas. All the old buildings either were bought out by legit businesses or are being left to urban decay. The 846 car wash facilities within a 10-mile radius. It's the furniture stores for me. Ain't no way we need a Becker Furniture, Home Furniture, Ashley's Furniture, and Slumberland, all within like a 5-mile radius of each other. No one is buying that much furniture all the time. Lived in a city of about 50,000, and they have automatic car washes everywhere. The main intersection of the town had one on each corner, and multiple being built within eyesight of the others. It blows my mind. There's a spiritual healing place near me, but often when I walk by, I see rows of people through the window, on the 2nd floor, all looking like they are monotonously working on something. I have seen people screaming out the window of the place at other people, and stuff too, which always seemed weird. Based on the logo of the place, I thought it was a catering place at first, and that they were just mass-producing food for events, But then I looked into the place more at one point, and found that they are some spiritual place that has women's healing circles and stuff, despite the fact that I have never seen a woman there at all, only very old Muslim men. This has a strong human trafficking vibe to it. The women's circle was the only part that was necessarily feminine on the front of the building, so I just figured that they must not end up doing that part often, and that it's probably a spiritual thing, mainly for men, despite them looking like they were actively working on things. After your comment, I decided to look into it further, just to be sure, and found that the site is about women's spiritual work, almost exclusively, which was more confusing, until I figured it out. The building itself is pretty small, but it turns out that the explanation was pretty innocuous, and despite there not being a sign on the outside for it, Google shows that there's a Muslim charity operating out of the same building, so I guess they take the upper floor, and the spiritual place might just not get much business, or if they do, it's at times that I'm not walking past, so I've only seen the people who work for the charity. They aren't really a business, so I guess they didn't need a publicly viewable front of their office, or workspace, or whatever they use it for. It was something I was curious about for a while, but I wasn't genuinely worried enough to the bottom of it, so thanks for giving me the motivation for it. There was a Chinese restaurant in the area I used to live. It was in a strip mall kind of setup, but the inside looked like you stepped into a Chinese storybook. It was beautiful inside, had carved wooden dividers between the booths, and a koi pond in the entrance. It was amazing. The food was incredible, but reasonably priced. But there was never more than 1 or 2 tables occupied, anytime we went there. The hostess looked like a porcelain doll, and had the best posture I've ever seen. She was very nice, but I always got the feeling I wasn't exactly welcome. Not in a rude way, but in a, you don't really know what this place is, do you? way. Sometimes, a group of Chinese men would come in and be escorted to the back of the restaurant, where there was a huge round table, and the doors would be closed. I feel it was either some sort of organized crime front, or a brothel. I worked as a chef in a cafe in Newtown, Sydney, back in 2003 to 2005. Cash in hand job, paid at the end of every day. It was owned by 3 Lebanese brothers, who I knew were dodgy in one way or the other, but I didn't know how much. Turns out, the cafe was just for money laundering their organized crime syndicate. I found out when one of the owners, this 6'2", 120 kilograms, bald brick of man, was on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, face down on the ground, with a federal cop, with a machine gun pressed against the back of his head, with a headline, "Career Criminal Caught." He had been busted for extortion charges, for running a protection racket, on Oxford Street. Dude was eventually murdered by a rival gang, many years later, shot at the doorway of his own home. We have a gentleman that works in our office, whose job is serving legal paperwork. He is a retired sheriff's deputy, and had also worked as an investigator for the state agency, who enforces cigarette and alcohol tax, and license rules. He has a great story about he was working on a case that involved suspicion that a particular gas station was illegally selling cigarettes, purchased from another state, and brought across state lines, to avoid cigarette taxes. He and his partner pulled up in the parking lot to prepare to go inside and do a spot check for the requisite tax stamps and paperwork. They were getting ready when he got a phone call from his boss, telling him to stop what he was doing right that second, and that he was going to get a phone call from another officer on a different investigation. A bit later, he spoke to an FBI agent, who explained that they had the gas station under surveillance as part of a federal investigation. Later, the owners of the gas station were arrested in connection with a money laundering investigation, where they were sending the money to Afghanistan. I'll add one that I actually got the answer to. There was an Italian restaurant that was gaudy, dingy, and at the busiest intersection of my decently sized city. It was always sparsely populated. I went after seeing it for 10+ years, and the food was pretty good to be honest, but nowhere near the amount of people going to make ends meet. Far forward a few years, my friend is in sales at Cisco. He informs me that intended it does lose a ton of money, but they have a downtown location in a major city nearby that supports it. It was the original location, built by the dad and the 2 daughters, who run it. Now both don't have the heart to let it go, as they're still making money. During COVID, they finally did close it, but it had been a running joke in my family, since '98, that it was a front. American candy shops in the UK. Yep, Oxford Street in London, a main shopping strip, has outpriced most of their stores over the years into closure, and all of a sudden, there's an American candy store, literally every 4 or 5 stores from each other. All totally empty. There's some YouTube videos of people questioning them, and random civilians, all start harassing and threatening them. A very obvious crime circle, almost certainly money laundering, but it seems to be accepted. Edit, I mean empty, customer-wise. Full shop supplies, 0 customers. These are stores I used to see packed, whether it be DVD stores, electronics, whatever. They closed, and now have empty American candy stores. How is that possible? A local pizza shop, that does a brisk business, in some really good pies. According to one of the cops I know, it's on the list of businesses they aren't allowed to associate with, due to it being involved in money laundering, for a biker gang. There's a Godfather's Pizza in Galveston, that always seems to be empty. No ads, not even local, as far as I've seen. The couple of times we've gone, they seem to be surprised by having customers. We got a pizza, and it was great, but it felt sketchy. Anyway, if y'all ever get down to Galveston, and want a really good pizza, that Godfather's still tastes the way it used to. When I was living in New Jersey, there was a hoagie place, that was always a Little Sue's. It was cash only, a favorite of the local cops, and everyone who worked there, were the most Sopranos ass mother effers you'd ever meet. It had all sorts of groceries and ingredients from Italy, and in the center was the deli counter. But what was weirdest was, it had a ton of signs like this, which is an extremely strange thing to find in New Jersey. I think, it has the lowest gun ownership in the country. Then, one day, the entire business disappears overnight, with no warning, and everyone related to it disappears. Everyone in the area was talking about it, and no one had any idea what happened. What sucks is, they made the best damn Italian hoagie I've ever had in my life. And number 2 is not close. I weep for those hoagies. I live in a super rural area, and there is a vape shop the next town over, that only keeps like 5 to 6 nicotine products, but is all in on weed, or THC stuff. They service a town of less than 2,000, in a very red, and anti-weed area of the state, and are dealing with massive competition, in either direction from their exact location. It is run and owned by an elderly Asian man. They always have an extra staff member, that acts like a bouncer, to the back room, and there is a painting, of a big-titted anime girl, that is visible from the road on one wall. No one is ever in there, and the only times I've been in, the only thing I was able to purchase, was a tangerine-flavored vape juice, that nowhere in 100 miles carries, but they only had it twice. If they're not doing something illegal, I don't know how they are possibly making money. We have Fred's Fish Fry in San Antonio. It's a running gag, actually believed by many, that it's a drug, or money laundering front. In reality, it's basically fast food seafood. Though the only things I've ever seen anyone get, are fish fillets, or fish fillet sandwiches, and they definitely look like regular frozen fish fillets. You also never see many cars out front. Usually just 1, maybe 2, if it's busy. I can't remember the name of the Chinese restaurant, but me and my girlfriend went to a place once, because we were in the area and had just moved to town, and we walk into this buffet-style place. There's 2 other parties of people sitting inside, eating. And maybe 2 servers working the counter and floor. We walked in, and the second we did, everyone looked at us, like, "What are you doing here?" And we continued to get those looks by the other customers every couple minutes, while we were there. When we left, we both said the same thing. Do you think that's a front for money laundering or something? Moved into my place for my new job, and there was this small dirty-looking Mexican place. I was excited, because I love Mexican food. So, I go in, with my friend who speaks Spanish, and as soon as the door opens, everyone stops what they're doing, and looks at us. The only patron there, was an older rough-looking Mexican guy, who drank a beer, and stared at us the entire time. We get to the bar, and my friend tells the bartender lady, "We want to order food to go." Just then, people start pouring out of the back of house, and a girl pops up from under the bar, looking very surprised, and wipes her mouth. We'll leave once the food is ready, and the food was awful. I ordered tacos, they have meat taquitos from a freezer. I go online to look at reviews from this place, and it gets really weird. All the reviews talked about were the girls that worked there, saying, "They are great, and they always come back for this one, or that one." TLDR, I'm pretty sure this place was a front for a prostitution ring. The name of the restaurant? El Taco Baja, the Southern Taco. We have a non-profit, located next to a Marcico's restaurant. They're consistently empty, in a place that would require large amounts of rent. They have the only access to the roof on the block. When trying to fix our AC, the manager threatened to beat us with a wrench, for entering their kitchen, to use the ladder, after the owner gave permission and notice. Absolute front. Friend works at the bank, and has a local Vietnamese restaurant owner come in every single day, to deposit $9,500 cash. Just below the amount to get flagged. Either they're lying, or the bank is committing crimes, as well. This is well known as structuring, and any bank worth a grain of salt would report it, after 3 to 4 consecutive days of transactions. There was a caving supply store across the road from me, and I don't think I even noticed anyone ever go in, or come out of it, within the 5 years I lived in that flat. Ha! This one might be legit. Cavers absolutely beat on their equipment. An active caver might replace a pair of rather expensive overalls every year or two, and likely has a couple of pairs in rotation. A cave pack probably gets repaired 2 or 3 times, and is then replaced. Replacement bars for the rack, ropes, anchors, lights, helmets, harnesses and parts. But I think I've been into an actual bricks and mortar store once. You order online, and it gets delivered. Maybe a phone call now and then. Literally, all the late-night massage parlors. I live in the burbs of Melbourne, and every few blocks there is a massage parlor, open until midnight. There must be a dozen within a square kilometer, and that's not uncommon in all the surrounding suburbs too. There's probably a few hundred on this side of the city, maybe thousands. I find it really hard to believe that a shire of about 150,000 can support 100 massage parlors, considering that about 40,000 would be kids, and even if they're doing the rub and tug business model, that'd mean every man in the area would have to go once a week for them to clear enough money to pay rent and staff, as in it'd be about 600 men per parlor. I'm just assuming that the books say they had clients booked all day, every day, who all paid top price in cash, and that's what they tell the tax man to launder the money. Ditto for some of the 24-hour gyms. About 20 in the same area, some of which never seem to have anyone in them. There's this one vacuum place in Arlington, Texas, my brother and I are convinced is a front for a drug smuggling ring. There's never any cars in the parking lot, and all the vacuums hanging in the front glass on display are all bag vacuums from the 80s and 90s. It's called Evans Vacuum. My brother just texted me the name, Big W. There was a little pizza joint in my hometown that we were fairly sure was a front for something. It was one of the only places that stayed open past midnight, and they always seemed vaguely surprised that someone would actually come in and order pizza. Was honestly pretty decent stuff, too. There was also a different pizza joint, whose owner was involved in smuggling arms to the Middle East, but the restaurant wasn't really a front as such. In the opposite direction, there's a chain in San Francisco called Signore's Pizza. They're hole-in-the-wall by the slice counters that sell Cisco-quality pizza to drunk kids late at night. It's owned by a Middle Eastern man who will use the profits from one to open another. Each time he opens one, it's an excuse to get more of his nephews to immigrate to the US to run them. Organ store. Maybe it's just me, but it seems like a really weird business, no? Like, it's a dedicated store in the mall that sells musical organs. Like, full-on giant electric organs, not Casio keyboards, or whatever. Dude sits at the front of the store, playing as loudly as he can. And don't ask him to turn it down, you'll get a very friendly middle finger for asking. Who the hell is buying organs? I'm sure they're expensive, and maybe the markup is astronomical, but how many people shop for organs, especially at the mall? I used to live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and there was a flag store there that never seemed to do any business, but was there for years. A friend said he firmly believed it was a front, because how often do you need a flag? And how many flags would it take to pay the rent? Nothing in the storefront but flags. It was a fairly large space, too. Weird. I own a small IT company, and mostly work from home. I live in a rural area, with a low cost of living, but I make substantially more than the average income for the area. Because of my income, and lack of shit to do up in the middle of nowhere, I have a lot of toys, Legos, video games, top-spec gaming PCs, car stereo, yada yada. All of my toys add in my last name being Italian, and it creates this rumor in the high school, that I'm a mob boss. My kids hear this rumor regularly, and are asked about it, and what I do. One dude wouldn't date my daughter, because he was afraid of my connections. I live in a town of 1,000 people, we have 2 bars and 0 stoplights. I highly doubt we have any mob activity, and I can promise you, if we do, I'm not involved. There was an Italian restaurant that I had never been to. My brother was visiting from out of town, and we decided to try it out. When we went in, the people working there didn't know what to do, like, they didn't expect people to sit down to eat at their restaurant. We were the only people there. It was so sketchy, and the food really wasn't good. We saw 2 pizzas go out for delivery while we were there. Our guess was drug dealing. It closed not long after, and is now a burger joint that's doing really well. I live in a condo in Florida. Pretty high up. I've been watching this nursery, Think Plants, across the street. During the day, it doesn't get any business. But at nighttime, it gets a lot of business. Vehicles stopping by, and people hopping out, and running in for 5 minutes, and then leaving again. This happens all night long. All the businesses around it are closed at nighttime. He's single, and he only has 1 vehicle. Many times at 3 in the morning, I'll see 3 to 4 cars there, headlights on. One person hopping out of the car, going in, while the driver keeps the motor running. Probably the perfect place to have a grow operation, or sell hard to see any transactions, because he has so many plants. I'm sure the Fort Myers police would be happy to put this nursery out of business. There is a dentist in North Jersey. My buddies and I rented a 3-bedroom unit above them. The back stairs inside the house connected our unit with theirs, as well as to the basement. There were countless nights where we'd be woken up at 2 to 4 a.m. to tons of noise in the basement, and a van would come and go during those nights. We complained, and they said it was simply the hours we make our dentures. One day, they left the basement open, and we drew straws for who would venture down. I unluckily drew the short one, and ventured down. There was no equipment, there were scales and tons of unmarked boxes that we've never seen the dentist use. They are 100% a drug front.